I found He-Man in L.L.Bean Country. So I was recently spending some time in the Northeast, in New England, in New Hampshire specifically, visiting my extended family and my in-laws. And my in-laws love shopping at L.L.Bean. And L.L.Bean is not really my scene. It's not really my aesthetic, not my vibe. I do remember when I was a kid, I had like an L.L.Bean backpack that I took to school, and I did love that. So off we go to L.L.Bean. And this is actually like an annual occurrence. Like every time I go to visit them, they're always like, oh, it's time to go shopping at L.L.Bean. And so for the past several years, I've endured sort of like the boring trip to L.L.Bean to look for canvas totes and rain slickers. This year, when we went to L.L.Bean, we kind of like made a wrong turn in the country road, and we came at it from like the other side. And my sister-in-law was in the backseat of the car, and she was just sort of like looking out the window and daydreaming as we were rounding the corner to L.L.Bean for the millionth time, but from the other way. And she says, "Hey, isn't that toy thing that you like?" And I looked out the window, and there was a thrift store, a vintage toy store called Masters of the Toyverse. I couldn't believe it. Across the street and behind the building of the L.L.Bean store that I've been at for many, many times was an entire vintage store dedicated to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So obviously we had to go, and it was amazing. It was so cute. They had everything. They had so many things. And normally I don't like to vintage shop for toys. And I spoke about this in another video, that getting toys that were someone else's toys, it just seems weird to me because they're not like my memories. When I have vintage toys from my own childhood, then I have my own memories with that. And when there were items from my childhood that I never got, and I get to get them as an adult, like it's kind of fun to get the new version of it, which is why I love everything that Mattel's been doing with like the new version of everything. I mean, so much in my toy room is sort of like the new version. It's not a vintage Miss Pac-Man game. That is like from the modern era. But I digress. Since when in Rome, since we were in New England, and thrifting is such a popular pastime there, and I thought, well, okay, I'll get some stuff here because the novelty of it. And I couldn't believe how many times I've been bored at L.L.Bean, and I could have just walked across the street and had the time of my life at Masters of the Toyverse.
I don't want to go to L.L.Bean. I want to do something that's fun for me. I can't think of anything that could be worse. Thank God I found Masters of the Toyverse.
Now, the first thing that I had to pick up when I was in Masters of the Toyverse was an attack track. Now, this attack track's a little bit broken, but it still works as a great place to display your figures. Now, one of the little loopholes to my rules about thrifting and not wanting to necessarily thrift is that if it's something that Mattel hasn't reissued, which the attack track has not been reissued, and I never had an attack track as a kid, I thought this is finally my opportunity to get an attack track. So I was also able to pick up a vintage Fisto. So I have a vintage Fisto, but he's not in really good condition. So like another loophole to my own self-prescribed rules is that if I see something that is something that I have already had, then I guess somehow that's also fair game. And then the last two items I got was a vintage Adam and a vintage Bo, and I loved it. So the no-brainer to why I just had to pick up some of these items in the store was, as I said, this was all taking place like in the countryside of New Hampshire, and the pricing was amazing. They were only like $8. And being in Southern California in the LA area, sometimes like thrifting is actually like priced up. And if you go into a toy store where they're selling older items, sometimes they cost even like more than they should. So all in all, I had such a great time in the countryside in L.L.Bean territory, finding Eternia, finding He-Man and the Masters of the Universe in the midst of it all, getting some fun vintage finds. And if you're ever in the area, definitely check it out, Masters of the Toyverse. I'll put the link in the description. So thanks for watching and have a great country journey.